Welcome everybody to the spring meeting of the University Council. My name is Melissa Gjellstad. I am currently serving as the chair of the University Senate in my last public appearance. No, it's great to be here. I'm glad you're here, and thank you for coming. Just a quick reminder first about the agenda and the call to order. We will be having today first a legislative and campus update by University President Robert Kelley, and Vice President Brecky will also be speaking. Then I'll speak and give a University Senate update, and followed by some matters arising. We will take some questions for the President and the Vice President after they're done speaking, and then we will do the same after I'm done speaking. So that's sort of the format I thought we'd follow for today. So just quickly to a reminder about what the University Council is. From the UND Constitution, the University Legislature consists of the Council and its Senate. The faculty's legislative power currently rests in the Council and the Senate, and the Council is all benefited faculty, academic personnel, and administrative officers. We have 89 senators who meet the first Thursday of every month. In the University Senate, they consist of elected council members, 2 per college, 8 for the College of Arts and Sciences with the 4 functions, and the remainder are at-large faculty on 1 and 2 year terms. There are 3 times the number of faculty as the ex officio members, so that's 18 administrators, 54 faculty, 3 staff elected by the Staff Senate, 14 students elected by the student government, and there are 23 committees with about 270 folks, 3 ad hoc committees, about 25 more folks, which add up to about 385 folks, faculty, staff, students, administrators, engaged currently this year in the work of the University Senate on shared governance. So with that short introduction, I'll ask you to join me in welcoming UND President Robert Kelley.
Melissa, thank you. It's been a genuine pleasure working with you this year on University President's Cabinet. You've been very productive with our Senate, so thank you for all the commitment and hard work this year. I want to introduce Matt Kopp. I don't know where Matt ended up. He's here. Matt, stand up, our new student body president. Congratulations. And yes, I need to answer a question that I was asked several times coming into the building. I did lose a bet with this tie. I lost a bet to Cassie Gerhardt. She's trying to promote this now as the new UND tartan, complete with our university colors. So the answer is yes, I am wearing it of my own volition. I want to begin by thanking everyone for coming this afternoon, just to kind of complete the year with sort of a summary of some of the issues of where we've been and what we have accomplished this year. Again, I want to say thanks not only for leadership, but thanks for all of you and the hard work that you put behind our exceptional university. I know that you put in many, many long committed days. I want to say thanks also, in addition to Melissa, I want to say thanks to Charlie Kurt. Charlie, are you here? Charlie, thank you for your work with the Staff Senate. You've been a great leader this year. Also want to congratulate you on your Toby and Kim Baker Award yesterday. Very, very well deserved, well earned. Congratulations. I want to say thanks also to our Student Senate. They've worked very hard this year, and we look forward, Matt, to working with you as we go forward next year. I think it's pretty clear that we wouldn't have any collaborative or shared governance if we didn't have our senates, and I look forward to seeing how our senates evolve over the coming semesters. Now, there's an awful lot of good news that we can talk about. There's been a considerable amount of very good work, again, because of all of you. And I'd like to cover some of that, just a very, very quick summary, not everything by any stretch. First of all, a very personal note. Yesterday I learned that Marcia and I had been deeply honored by the receipt of, I guess, a faculty, staff, and student endowment that was put together in our names, honoring our commitment to collaborative governance. And I just want to say thank you to all of the communities that put this together. Marcia and I are deeply, deeply honored. Several other things that I want to just mention. There is a Young Scholars Research and Creative Activity Program. This is being put together. It will provide funding from the UND Alumni Association and Foundation in the amount of about $100,000 this year and $100,000 next year to help pre-tenure faculty just starting faculty to promote their academic careers, and this will be open to all of our pre-tenured faculty. We've set aside about $30,000 for a pilot project created to support work with non-science faculty to work with scientific researchers, trying to find more ways to generate more innovative scholarship on our campus. It's kind of an innovative pilot program. Our provost has set aside about $125,000 for research scholarship and other kinds of creative works in the arts and humanities. And this is partnered with about another $70,000 from the Dean of Arts and Sciences. Clearly what we want to accomplish is more incentive and more output on the part of all of our productive faculties in areas that don't necessarily have the deep pockets that we see for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and so on. And I want to say personally, I have been where you are. I know how hard it is to produce work. And I congratulate you on the tremendous productivity that this faculty and staff have generated this past academic year. I want to let you know, too, that the vice presidents and I are very committed to addressing the needs that you have expressed to us. And we've heard you loud and clear. We've got to find ways to do more in communication. We've got to find a broader means, a broader variety of ways in which we can communicate together. And I guess the second area that I have certainly heard loud and clear is that we need to define and produce better levels of collaboration, primarily on budget and fiscal matters. And we will be talking about that as we move partly through Alice Brecky's presentation. But as we begin the next academic year, we'll be spending more time talking about how all of us can know more about where the money is generated and spent as we administer this university. Let me say a few words about communication. This is kind of an interesting challenge for all of us, and I'm going to ask for your help, some commitment on the part of all of you. I can certainly commit myself to providing information. We have lots of avenues to provide information, but I think this is something we kind of need to do together. Communication is kind of both ways. So I think we need to find some avenues by which we can communicate in this two-way street of communication more effectively. And I commit to working with you to find some of those more improved avenues. We do a number of things. I hope they're helpful to you. We send out periodically this little e-letter, the things to know. We've certainly made updates through our university senate. We will continue to do all of that. I know sometimes we get busy. We don't meet quorums in our collective units. Collaboration, communication breaks down a little bit. So we need to find ways in which we can communicate more effectively and more productively. I think one thing that we might try to do is a few more town hall type meetings where we could just casually relax and share information, talk about that information, and find ways to move forward together. I know that the provost, the vice presidents, and I are very committed to finding those avenues with you. At the last University Senate meeting, several things were brought forward. I will admit to you on a personal level, I was a little surprised and kind of glad to hear them. And one of them is the phased retirement issue. That was brought forward very clearly and very concisely. Don't know that we have a specific answer and resolution to that today, but the provost has committed himself to reviewing it. I think all of you earlier today may have received an email from the provost talking about how that will be reviewed, trying to figure out exactly what it is that we have on the website relative to phased retirement, and then be working with the Senate's Compensation Committee to review any of the information that is on that site and getting some recommendations and suggestions for clarity as we go forward together. If you haven't seen it already, I would ask that you take a look at the note that Provost DiLorenzo sent around earlier today. I think the other issue that is very important to me, and I'll make this coming from me, shared governance is very important within our university. When I was a faculty member years ago, as I became more administratively involved, I valued the fact that we could talk together and define the policies that will help us run an institution. We have a large, active organization, and we need to share and collaborate in the governance of this university. As I was listening to the conversation last week at the Senate meeting, it kind of occurred to me that maybe we don't have the same definition of collaborative governance. Some of us, I think that may mean we participate in every decision that assigns every dollar to every activity within the university. Others of us may think that no, it's a much more overarching activity of defining together the policies that will run this university, maybe going into some of the procedures that will implement those policies, but leaving the nuts and bolts to others, not necessarily faculty per se. So I think we need to maybe address some of those issues, find ways where we do have common definition, and find ways, again, where we can move forward together. Another point that I picked up on last week in the conversation had to do with consultants, and on this point, I completely agree. I saw that Jeff Holm, Dr. Holm, several others suggested on Fact Talk that we need to get more consultants from our own campus, and again, I agree. Now, as always, we can't do 100% in either direction. We are doing a lot of consultation among our faculty. I'll use Dr. Tim Pash as an example. Very quietly, we have asked him to consult with our Division of University and External Affairs for several months. We've done that very quietly. We haven't advertised it. If we perhaps should advertise it a little bit more so that everyone will know that we're using that consultant, we should do that. There are some areas, though, that I think we do need external consultants. As you all know, we're in the process of defining mechanisms by which we reassign budgets, deal with new budgeting models. Alice is going to talk with you about that in just a moment. And the mechanisms by which we allocate resources within the university in a more flexible way. We have spent, I think, the better part now of 2 years, or more even, working on different models that will help us allocate the resources within the university so that we can grow components of the university, taking advantage of opportunities while not necessarily losing the advantages that we have in other areas. This is complicated. Many individuals have been involved, and we have involved some very, very expert external consultants for what amounts to a sea change in the way we administer our resources. Search consultants are another matter. We don't always need to hire a search consultant, but occasionally they are very, very helpful. I volunteer, bless her heart, Cherie Williams in my office to do some of the administrative searches, and she can tell you how much work is involved. She can also tell you that we are long past the time where we put out an advertisement in the Chronicle for Higher Education and expect applications for those positions to just flow in or come in under the door miraculously. This just doesn't happen anymore. Search firms, search consultants know individuals who might be willing to be considered for high-level positions. They also can help us connect with those individuals, sometimes in ways that are more privileged and quieter. So I would just like to say that I agree with you on the point of consultants. We will try to find more and more ways to use our individual resources within our campus. But I hope you don't expect it to be 100% because we will drown in a lot of different work. Let me just make a few concluding comments here before I ask Alice to come up and take the podium. There is just an awful lot of very, very positive things going on right now on our campus that will make us a stronger academic campus, a stronger research campus, a stronger campus for our students and the teaching and learning that they help participate in with all of us. There are 5 major building projects going on campus. Some of them will be completed this summer. I think the Health Sciences building will be about a year away. We are on track to complete the High Performance Athletics Center. Wilkerson Commons will be ready for student use next fall. Robin Hall is starting to come out of the ground over on the west side of campus. So there's just an awful lot of capital construction going on that will help us with our facilities for academic and other purposes. We're making progress. Oh, yes, and the law school. Sorry, I knew there was a 5th one there. I just spaced on. Catherine, I looked right at you. I apologize. You had a big smile, and I knew I was supposed to do something, and I forgot. I'm sorry. My apologies. We're making progress with the nickname committee. Stay tuned through the summer. More will be coming. This has turned into quite a challenge for us. The next meeting of the committee, they'll be going through another 500 or 600 names, trying to pare that down to the beginnings of what will eventually be a short list. Now I'd like to turn the podium over to Alice. We've come through a very productive legislative session, productive in lots of different ways. I'll ask Alice to walk us through House Bill 1003 and talk a little bit about some of the budgetary implications as well as some of the policy implications for the university.
Good afternoon. I have the honor of visiting with you this afternoon about 4 months of very hard work that occurred in Bismarck. Certainly, if you see any of our legislators, local or otherwise, please thank them for all of their hard work and their diligence on our behalf. There are a number of bills that were passed. I'll start with the appropriation bill for higher education, which is House Bill 1003. For higher education, on average, there was a general fund increase for the biennium of about 8.5%. That increase was intended to cover the state share of a number of costs, including salary increases, increase in the cost of fringe benefits, and what we call the cost to continue. Within each biennium, the second year of the biennium creates an increased cost that there is only 1 year of funding within the biennium. So as we move to the next biennium, we need for the legislature to fill a second year of those increased costs and then provide the dollars for additional cost increases going forward. There is also a student share that's anticipated, which would be reflected in potential tuition rate increase, and I'll come back to that in just a minute. So for UND operations, there's about $17.6 million of general fund increase, and a portion of that does go to the medical school under our current formula funding model. There is also an additional $18.7 million that goes directly to the medical school, and that is funding for the next ramp up of the healthcare workforce initiative. So not only was the legislature funding the facility need when they authorized the new building, and they did put in place the final installment of funding on the building, $62 million, they also are moving in lockstep with the plan that the medical school brought forward to increase the number of graduates coming out of the medical school, both the MD and the other healthcare professions. Moving beyond the operating types of funding, there was $6 million general fund appropriated for a project out in the airport. That is phase one of that project. It's a $16 million project in total to redo the apron area that is used by UND Aerospace in its flight training. $6 million will allow them to complete phase one in the next 2 years. There was also authority granted for a student engagement project, student engagement space, and this would be funded with donor money, assuming those funds are raised. In addition, $760,000 appropriated to replace the roof on the North Dakota Museum of Art. There was a recognition there was a drastic need there. Those funds were put in place. That is a building that is owned by UND, although it is occupied by a nonprofit, which is the North Dakota Museum of Art. Moving on into deferred maintenance and extraordinary repairs. You'll recall seeing in the media there was a master plan report that was done at the university system level that did quantify needs for the various campuses in the area of deferred maintenance. There is a pool that has been put at the university system level, $8.7 million towards deferred maintenance. $3.5 million of that UND would have the ability to access, and there would need to be approval by the state board for that particular allocation. And we do need to identify specific projects that meet appropriate criteria. There also was funding put in place, again at the system level, for campus safety and security initiatives. The proposals that UND had brought forward in that category had to do with surveillance and electronic door access. There's $3 million at the system level. Criteria need to be developed at the system level, and we would have opportunity to apply for those funds. In the normal course of events, the university has received each biennium funding for what's called extraordinary repairs. That's our ongoing repairs and maintenance, primarily for our academic and administrative spaces. It's about $4.4 million for UND for the biennium. In this appropriation bill, the legislature tied a match requirement to those funds. So the $4.4 million is available to UND only if we can identify a $2 to $1 match. So for every dollar we want to spend of state money, we have to bring $2 to the table. So effectively, that triples the size of the pool, which is the good news. The challenge is we've got to find the $8.8 million to assign to that match. I'll leave it as a challenge. We don't have an answer on that one yet. Finally, in the appropriation bill, there was language that was added that did put in place a cap on the rate of tuition increase. That cap is at 2.5% per year of the biennium, and that cap does not apply to programs in the School of Medicine. There was a recognition that the mix of state and student share with the implementation of the Healthcare Workforce Initiative, that it was important to enable that initiative going forward as it had been planned over multiple biennia. So with the 2.5% cap, there is opportunity with budget section approval to exceed that. At this point in time, we do not plan to propose that. Certainly, we are sensitive to and very conscious of affordability as a concern for our students. With that said, when you take the general fund dollars for operation and the original estimate of what a tuition increase would generate, there is a gap between what we need for the cost to continue, the salary increase, and the health premium increase when you bring the new resources to the table. At this point in time, the plan is to proceed with our annual budget process status quo. So we'll move forward recognizing that that gap exists. We will be fine-tuning revenue forecasts as we go through our annual budget process. As we get through the summer and into the fall, we'll be engaging in conversations about what are the near-term strategies, and there are opportunities as to how you bridge that for a period of time, and then what are the long-term kinds of conversations we need to have so that over the long term, what we are doing is sustainable from a financial standpoint. Given that we have come off of a legislative session and recognizing that under that scenario, we end up with about a 3-week time period to craft a budget, there simply is no time to have any reasonable or informed conversations, nor is there time to do the reality check on all of the various revenue streams that we do need to take into consideration. So that is the approach we are taking at this point. In addition, from a funding standpoint, the legislature did renew the Challenge Grant program, and that's great news. In this cycle, they have identified $7 million of general fund, which will be a match for donor funds, $2 donor fund, $1 of Challenge Grant. The first $2 million awarded must be used for student scholarships. So that's a new criteria that has come into play. In addition, there was wording added into the bill which indicates the funds cannot be used for capital projects, they cannot be used for facility repairs, and they cannot be used for scholarships intended solely for the benefit of athletics. So there really is a very strong academic focus in how those resources will be applied. And the hope is that we will be able to leverage those with donor funds in partnership with the UND Foundation. That covers the dollar impact of what is included in the bills. And now I'd like to shift gears and talk a little bit about some of the policy types of implications of what's in the bills. And some of it, we have a reasonable idea of how that'll impact us and what needs to happen next. There are other parts to this where if you have questions, the answer will likely be stay tuned. We're not quite sure how this is going to unfold, and I'll give you a couple of examples here. There is a section that was added in House Bill 1003 that requires functional consolidation of electronic mail, file server administration, database administration, research computing, storage, application server, and hosting services to be through a delivery system established by the board. How that's going to get addressed at the university system level and how UND will play a role in those conversations and how all that's going to unfold, I think what the bill does is set an expectation. It's up to us to be at the table and to be focused on solutions within the framework that the statute now requires. A number of other areas that perhaps apply a little bit less to UND. There's a section added creating a workforce education advisory council. There also is a section added requiring a unified workforce vocational and technical education program for the system. Perhaps that has a little bit less impact on us. There was some fine-tuning done to the higher education funding formula. The factors that were adjusted don't necessarily impact us. It has more of an impact on the two-year schools. The piece where the impact did occur, though, is in what's called the inflationary factor in the formula. In a perfect world, we would have hoped that inflationary factor would have been a little higher. We fully understand the actions that were taken at the legislature are the resources we need to live within, and it's up to us to work together to make sure that we are making best use of the resources we have available. There was additional funding put in for student financial assistance programs, additional funding provided for North Dakota students through the Scholars Program. And there, I mean, you can drill down to a high degree of detail of how those programs are to be managed. Two items that do have an impact on us that I do want to walk you through. In one section of the bill, the legislature revoked the authority for the State Board of Higher Education to employ attorneys to represent them. So that carries down to the campus level. Requires written appointment by the Attorney General to provide representation in the form of an assistant or special assistant attorneys general. The impact for us is that the Attorney General's office will now be, effective July 1st, the service provider for the campus for legal services. Whether it is the designation of staff within the AG's office to provide those services, or whether there is expertise that is needed beyond the expertise that resides within the AG's office, there will need to be procedures put in place that enable us as a campus to access the services that are needed. Exactly what that looks like, we don't know. We certainly know that the AG, the Attorney General, and his office are committed to creating a model that works and provides the support and service that we need. Another change that will impact us has to do with internal audit. Historically, prior to the current biennium, UND has had internal auditors as employees to assist us with compliance, with monitoring, with cash counts, with just a variety of things. In the current biennium, so last legislative session, decision was made to move the dollars and the positions into the university system office under the purview of the Board of Higher Education. In this last or most recent legislative session, the funds were removed from the university system office and moved over to the state auditor's office. In the discussions that led up to that action, the state auditor was clear in communicating that the state auditor cannot be both our external auditor and our internal auditor. There's a conflict of interest there. So what we understand will occur is that the state auditor will look to employ some additional auditors who will be doing performance audits, although again, how this actually unfolds, I think remains to be seen. There is $300,000 in the university system office under the label of internal audit. What the board chooses to do with that in terms of are they going to contract for, are they going to hire, and exactly how that helps us with what we need to do at the campus level, again, that remains to be seen. I will tell you the state auditor was also very, very clear in saying even though we don't have the internal audit positions anymore, we still have responsibility for compliance. We still have responsibility for monitoring. So one of our challenges will be, how do we fulfill those functions going forward into the future? I'll shift gears a little bit. Back in, and I may not remember the exact year, 99, 2000, so a while ago, there were state-level discussions that were referred to as the Higher Education Roundtable, brought together private sector, state government, and higher education to talk about sort of the trade-offs between flexibility, accountability, how can we maybe perhaps approach these things a little bit more systematically with a higher degree of accountability and so forth. As a result of those discussions, we moved to a budgeting at the state level where we budgeted operating and capital assets, and we got out of the line item budgeting that drilled down to things like travel, computers, software, office supplies. We got out of having to do that when we submitted our biennial budget. There is wording now back in the appropriation bill that requires our budgets to be submitted using the same forms, the same supporting information and documentation as other budget units, in other words, other state agencies, including detailed comparative statements. So over the next little while, we're going to have to figure out how we interface what we do with what the expectation is now at the state level, getting down into what they call a pay plan, which gets down into a person-by-person salary. There's just a lot of detail that at the budgeting for the biennium standpoint, and keep in mind, we're typically doing that like a year ahead of the legislative session. We're going to have to figure out how we deal with and how we manage that. There also is a requirement for the state board to evaluate and correct data inconsistency issues. And the best way I can describe this to you is to read you the examples they put in the bill. And it broadly touches a lot of things. So the first example is lack of integration of personal and demographic information among computer systems. So whether you're talking the student system, whether you're talking payroll, whether you're talking accounting, there's pieces that go back and forth, and getting those all connected and talking to each other would be the way I would describe it. Lack of use of standard chart of accounts for financial reporting and standard department budget table deduction and tax override flags, which that's really getting down into the weeds. Essentially, as PeopleSoft was implemented back in 2005, there were a number of decisions made at the system level, and then some decisions that were allowed to be made at the campus level. And what this is nudging towards is a higher degree of consistency across all 11 institutions. Next one talks about inconsistent methods and procedures at institutions for recording high school completions, identifying student cohorts for reporting purposes, and classifying agency funds. Those are three things that really have nothing to do with each other, but again, they've identified those as things that they want some conversation regarding. At this point in time, this one goes first to the State Board of Higher Education, and it will be their call as to how the university system will approach responding and making progress in what that section of House Bill 1003 requires. One item on the funding thing I forgot to mention, and it's not in the higher ed budget. It is actually in the North Dakota Geological Survey budget. There was $13.6 million appropriated for an expansion of the Wilson Laird Core and Sample Library, which is on our campus and certainly is a critically important asset connected to our College of Engineering. So that actually is good news. I'm just looking, okay, two other items. University System Office. In the last probably 3 or 4 years, I've stood up in front of you and talked about things going on at the university system level that impact us. And although we make a great effort to really keep focused on the great work we need to be doing at the campus level, we also have to recognize that what's happening at the system level, we've got to live within. A new chancellor has been appointed. I think we've got a great opportunity in the going forward to work with the new chancellor. As the legislature did their work, they did put in place some reductions in the operating funds for what they call governance at the system level. There's a piece of that they've provided an opportunity to get put back once the new chancellor brings forward his staffing plan and sort of operationally, how is the university system office going to function. The question of how many staff and who those staff will be, I don't think we know how the landscape above us will change in the coming few months, and certainly we will look to be good and active partners in finding the solutions for the challenges that we and higher education as a whole face in the coming 2 years of the biennium. Last bill I want to talk about, and I can describe it for you, I will tell you I'm certainly not the one that's the expert on this, is Senate Bill 2150. That particular bill now requires that students and student organizations have a right to counsel who will actively participate in the disciplinary proceedings. And these are disciplinary proceedings that would address alleged violation of institution rules or policies. This right applies if the proceeding could result in suspension or expulsion from the institution. The right does not apply to matters involving academic misconduct. So that's just a Cliff Note summary. If there are questions in that regard, I'm going to pitch those to some of my colleagues. Those are not the questions I would be best equipped to answer. So with that long and perhaps a bit rambling summary, are there questions? Yes.
There are a number of capital issues in terms of like what's going to happen with the current med school building. We had some discussions in the past about some buildings going offline.
Yep.
I think there's been some talks about, say, building new buildings beyond what's going on now. Or do you have any updates on that?
Thank you. I appreciate the question. First of all, I want to take just a minute. I want to introduce Dave Chakraborty. Dave, could you stand up, please? Dave has joined us as Associate Vice President for Facilities Management. I will tell you, we have attempted to work diligently through the last academic year to make some progress on these conversations, and we have been able to make some progress. The timing of Dave joining us, and because we had a couple of vacancies in addition to his position, made it really difficult to get all the way through everything we had hoped to get through. We did work through some very preliminary and conceptual plans of what might go in to the old medical school or medical school building to be vacated. We will re-engage that conversation in the fall in a much more robust way. We do need to get through planning to understand the match between what could go in there with little to no additional investment and what dimensions of what could go in there that would require some additional investment. And that's something we are very, very sensitive to. With the construction that is going on campus, there are a handful of the buildings that we eventually hope to take offline that we are using as swing space. So, for example, the Strindon Center right now is being occupied by the law school. We do also have some law school presence and some storage at Dakota Hall. So those are two other areas. Arabelle Thompson Center, I believe, is now vacant. 314 Cambridge, again, we're using some of that space as we temporarily move some pieces around. And as you can imagine, when you start moving things, you create a domino effect. And how you work that through, you have to have some flexible space before you can get everything back to where it's going to go. So you will certainly be hearing and engaged in much more in-depth conversations. The medical school building being vacated will occur starting in the summer of 2016 through, I'm understanding, December of 2016. So really the opportunity to move anything in there in a substantial way will have to follow on. And until we know how that phasing is going to occur, we have to dovetail to that plan.
Alice, I read in the paper that the university has been hoping to have a tuition at 3.3% increase, and we're capped at 2.5. Could you confirm if that 3.3 is correct, and if so, or whatever it was, what's the shortfall that we're going to experience because of the cap?
The number actually, I believe, was 3.7, and the gap with the tuition is, and again, I'm going from memory, I've looked at a lot of numbers in the last couple of days, could be up to about 1.8 million. No, I'm going to flip that back. The tuition gap is 3 million. When we look at the general fund, it's about a $1.8 million gap. It's the other way around. So could be bumping up close to 5 million. At this point, we're fine-tuning revenue forecasts. Those were based on earlier projections, so I think at this point it's stay tuned. And once we lock in numbers as we get through the annual budget process, we'll be re-engaging some conversations.
Are you hoping for an increase in enrollment?
Stable.
Because we've graduated, our largest classes have graduated, so we're going to see a decrease in that. I think we're projecting our new students being stable, at least in terms of undergraduates. I don't know about graduate enrollment.
Yes.
Yes, I wondered if you could say more about buildings that will be going offline, or is that something that is known at this point?
There was an initial list proposed, and I want to be very, very careful to say it was proposed looking at an index that is maintained by facilities that's a condition index. And what that tells us is how much do you have to invest to get the building back up to a reasonable operating state, and is that an investment that you should make? We also acknowledged when the list was developed that if there were historic implications, those are going to have to be fully explored and vetted, and that's really an additional consideration, so it's not just the condition index. Interestingly enough, and I'm going to use Babcock as an example, based on condition, that building showed up as proposed. When the university system did their master planning, had a consulting group come in, we asked them specifically, we were able to identify half a dozen buildings for them to actually validate condition on. They actually came back with a higher condition index based on structural integrity and some other things. We took a look at that and said, you know, maybe that one shouldn't be on the list, and we need to consider other directions. So this is an evolving conversation. We want to take care and make sure that the decisions that are made are well-informed decisions, not just this is what the convenient thing to do is. Margaret?
Back to the very beginning of your comment, you said that the state appropriations to higher ed increased by what percent?
8.5. I believe out on the North Dakota University System website, They have a section that's labeled as reports. They do a recap of the various bills that have funding in them and whatever, and then they translate that into what does that mean from a numbers standpoint, and then they roll it up to the university system level. So that document, I believe, is available out on the NDUS website. Yes?
In the beginning, you were talking about, when you were talking about capital funding with the apron, that portion, you mentioned a student engagement space.
Yes.
Can you clarify what that is?
I'm going to ask the provost to clarify what that is. You want to talk about that? Student engagement space? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
We through the foundation, we have a donor who is providing funding for a student engagement center, and we've been working on that, and it was part of the match. And so that's where we stand at this point. It's an anonymous gift that you'll be finding out more of as time comes along.
A while back, a story came out that we're gonna start paying the cost of living for a number of our athletes. How big of a financial burden will that be?
I will tell you, I've had just a general preliminary conversation with the athletic director. At the time when we had the conversation, there were still quite a few what-ifs at the governance level within the NCAA, and absent clarification of those points, I mean, you can make a bunch of assumptions and calculate some things, but I don't think you really have a number with any credibility. I think the thing that I heard in that conversation that perhaps is important is that it's permissive, not required, and the question that many institutions are going to have to grapple with is how many sports, and then you have to maintain compliance with gender equity. Yep, so lots of moving parts in that question. Anything you want to add, President?
Alice, further clarification on that is we have a history in our institution that the year that President Kelley came on board, there was already a budget set that is not going to be changed. But it involved quite a sizable amount of money being taken from the Academic Affairs Office to go to the athletics program. And that hasn't been done again. And I think we're all pleased among us faculty. But I'm wondering if we can be feeling secure that if such a policy is adopted and we are going to augment the students' incomes, that those funds will not be coming out of the Academic Affairs Office or any of the academic programs.
One of the things I want to spend just a minute on, and President Kelley alluded to it in his comments, we are about 2 years into an evolution of how resources get allocated. And in the course of working through to the point we are at, there were a number of criteria that were put on the table that were considered critically important in developing any kind of model. Transparency and process were part of those criteria. So as we go forward, the budget for fiscal year 16, as I already mentioned, we've got about a 3-week window here, which there isn't time to really do anything. We'll get it in because we want to make sure that people get the appropriate paychecks come July. Beyond that, we will begin what's called a parallel year, where we are beginning the process which has committee structure, it has a number of dimensions to it, and we're through this semester. I know the provost has been working with the deans. We have begun the process on the support side of engaging folks and walking through kind of what this would look like, how will decisions get made, what sort of input, what sort of information, and so forth. So as this new wrinkle comes into play, how resources get assigned to that is going to have to be part of the conversation and the process. Yes?
Can you clarify what a functional consolidation in IP is?
I'm sorry, I cannot.
This is in the state bill, the HB.
Yep. In fact, if you give me a second, I might be, I beg your pardon?
HB 1003.
It's House Bill 1003, and I might suggest, and I don't see Josh here, you might want to chat a bit with Josh Reedy on this. He may have some additional information that I don't have.
Is there a timeline or anything? Nothing,
No.
just those words.
Yep. If you want to catch me after, I'll, in the meantime, scan through there. It's 30-plus pages, so it's not jumping out at me. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Brecky and President Kelley. I will, in the essence of time, try not to speak too quickly, but to try and give you an overview of the things that the University Senate has indeed accomplished this year. When I look back at my notes that I had made for the University Council meeting in November, my goals that I articulated there were to, number one, make more visible the work of the University Senate, and number two, to improve communication flow. So takeaway points are, be careful what you wish for in there. And thinking about that, I do want to commend all of the University Senators and everyone involved in working with the University Senate for the hard work that you have done this year. I'm encouraged by it. I know we can do better. Some of the things that we did tactically within the University Senate itself was to engage the senators and University Senate leadership at the meetings and having some working sessions within our monthly meetings to help identify agenda items. We also worked with senators to start an outreach tradition to go out and go back to constituents to bring messages back home to departments, back home to colleges, and help us spread the word. And we also reached out to committee chairs and started integrating the chairs in a conversation and try and get into a pattern where we integrate both the committee chair leadership more with some of the work that the individual senators do. So what I'm going to do quickly is to recap some of the standing committees' work, showcase some of that work. I realize that there are several committees I won't recognize here that function and do all of their work, from student academic standards, administrative procedures, SCOFR, honorary degrees, and online distance ed, and the awarding of monies from the Senate scholarly activities and faculty instructional development, and I thank you for all of that work, but let me just highlight a couple. Legislative affairs, as you've heard from Vice President Brecky's report, has also been busy looking at the needs of faculty, staff, and students within the legislative session. In the fall, we co-hosted the Measure 3 educational session, and in the spring, they did a research work to help us articulate the Senate resolution on HB 1003, advocating for no change in the NDUS structure for legal counsel and auditing functions. You've seen a lot of work from the Budget Reallocation and Restructuring Committee, both in the fall, as we've been talking about, and they've been talking about how we will be working to integrate this new budget model and increase campus financial literacy. In the spring, they worked on revising their committee membership, and they also held just recently the 3 sessions of the Budget 101 sessions to begin that step, anticipating having Budget 102 and Budget 103 sessions for faculty, staff, and students across campus in the fall to be able to encourage things to know and how we become more familiar with the inner workings of the budget model. Academic policies and admissions worked on class rank definitions, major policy declaration, credit hours, confirmation of tuition deposit, application priority deadlines, and a cooperative education policy throughout the year. Conflict of Interest and Scientific Misconduct Committee worked on the institutional conflict of interest in policy of human subject research this year. The Library Committee has had renewed engagement in the fall, particularly in engaging the conversation of the space and services redesign and a sustainable funding model. This spring, and just at our last Senate meeting last week, we passed a resolution to support financially the Chester Fritz Library in the coming budget model change. The Essential Studies Committee also has just completed a program review in the fall, and so conversations have been ongoing in the committee about the recommendations of that review. A new director search has just been held. They too have been looking at their committee charge, at definitions, and encouraging a conversation about the role of faculty governance in general education as a whole. That tailors well with the work of the University Curriculum Committee, who during the fall and spring has done tremendous work to approve new courses, programs, and all of the course and program changes that we've all submitted through our college committees. They too have revised their committee membership to help balance out the workload, and conversations are underway to talk about how we can align that stream, the process and workflow from department chair submissions all the way through the college offices, the college committees, and up to the university Curriculum Committee and on through the Provost Office and the President to the State Board. The Committee on Committees saw an uptick in the number of surveys, which means that there's a higher interest in the elections. And again, this ties back into this engagement with University Senate matters. So we've had more folks, more faculty this year indicating their interest for committee work of the University Senate. And so we're excited about that. And I will remind you that this is indeed the process by which we become engaged in the Senate. We're elected to these positions, and they're elected through, first of all, your indication of your interest within those surveys, and then moving through some of the election processes. So they are constantly at work making sure that we have the right balance of folks working on the variety of standing committees. And then the Senate Executive Committee. We worked to change the bylaws, enacting policy. We talked about how to plan and engage some dialogues between some of the four sort of communication channels that I mentioned with the senators. We had a new senator coffee in the fall. We had a thank you lunch for committee chairs in the spring. We had a soiree after our last Senate meeting as thanks. We worked on amending some committee charges. We worked on various policies on cost share, closeout, cooperative education. And we've used our agenda, set our agenda based on some of the working groups that I mentioned from some of our fall University Senate meetings, where we resulted in a list of what I called the top 5 topics that drove the agenda. Part of that was bringing speakers in during the announcement section to speak to senators. And we had speakers address the budget model, Title IX, core technology and IT security, community and campus committee, and high-risk alcohol consumption. And we also had a subcommittee just recently report findings on the faculty travel and research survey, funding survey that was circulated the last couple of weeks of the semester. Those preliminary results and the results of all the ad hoc committee work is actually on our University Senate webpage. With that, I'll transition actually to work of a couple of the ad hoc committees that have been particularly valuable this year. First, the Student Evaluations of Teaching, the USAT committee. This work started under Chair Zier last year and began their work in 2014, but they assessed the current instrument that we use for student evaluations of teaching, our USAT form. They reviewed the application, literature on the best practices, how it interfaces with promotion, tenure, and evaluation processes, and made recommendations for the use of a new SAT student evaluation of teaching form. That USAT 2.0 committee has been appointed as following the recommendations of that ad hoc committee. They are now called the Student Evaluation of Teaching Implementation Committee, SETIC. You'll be hearing more about them and from them this fall as they convene to have a campus forum to choose and pilot the new student evaluation of teaching form and look to engage the campus community about how we move forward with adopting and implementing a new piloting a form and adopting that. The second committee I'll mention has also been doing work for the last couple of years. That's the Shared Governance and Leadership Committee, and we've had our third campus conversation this fall. We had 2 last year. This fall's was on promotion, tenure, and evaluation and faculty engagement with Dean Catherine Rand and former University Senate Chair Jim Machurik. We also just completed the hour prior to this a faculty book group on the locus of authority, the evolution of faculty roles in the governance of higher education. I believe that's also the second book group that we've had just on shared governance and leadership. And also, based on the recommendation of the white paper, as President Kelley mentioned, the creation of an award for Collaborative Governance Award, the President Robert and Marcia Kelley Collaborative Governance Award, also to look at this notion of service and the trend and talking about it as leadership and what that means for how we value shared governance and leadership on campus. Another leg of that shared governance ad hoc committee work has been the Committee on Shared Governance, who created, I believe, 3 separate reports after faculty input in forum during last year and then in this fall. And I sent you all, benefited faculty, a survey on faculty governance in November, which analyzed the results over December and presented in January about our understanding of faculty governance, discussing that and the outreach back with senators back to campus. As a part of the work in the March and April meetings, I believe February and March meetings, the referendum was moved to form the Faculty Senate, which I also circulated as a survey. 39% of all benefited faculty responded to that. Of that percentage, 80 said yes to form a Faculty Senate, which then was moved and endorsed in the April session to endorse and form a Faculty Senate, and a second motion to enable me to, as the chair of the University Senate, to form 2 committees that will work over the summer to construct a constitution and bylaws to bring to the University Senate in the fall and continue the conversation about what those governance bodies will look like. I have been waiting for the end of the elections for the Staff Senate and the Student Senate to complete so that I can have conversations with the incoming leadership teams of both the student and the staff senates to be able to speak with them before we move forward in appointing those committees. But I anticipate that work will get done, and if you are interested in working on that constitutional language, do let me know, because I'm happy to talk to you about that. In addition to some of the work of those 2 groups, the standing and the ad hoc committees, other issues arose during the year. University Senate did a fair amount of work on the SOAR process, the program prioritization process that we have been engaged in for the last year. We also have worked with the Promotion, Tenure, and Evaluation Working Group that has been constituted and is working to talk about alignment and policies and procedures within promotion, tenure, and evaluation on campus. The Ombuds has just recently been hired, I believe, and that is a cause that the University Senate has been championing for at least, I think, the last 4 terms, and so it's great to see that position filled as a full-term position. We've also chosen a faculty member for the new nickname committee. We contributed to the parking survey. We've done outreach. The leadership of the University Senate has done outreach to the Alice Clark groups and a pilot group of clinical instructors, thanks to Ann Kelsch in the Office of Instructional Development. And we've also worked at improving our webpage. One of the things that we're going to work on over the summer is there's been requests and calls to find out what's going on within the University Senate, so we're working on having headshots to be able to identify senators and committee chairs so that you all know who they are and can get hold of them and be able to find them and reach them. So to everybody who's had a part of that and asked questions and helped make that process better, thank you very much. I have some particular thank yous to the committee chairs. I've already mentioned their work. All the administrative units, offices, and key staff members who do support all of the committee work for the University Senate. A special note and huge thanks to the Registrar's office, to our Registrar Suzanne Anderson and Lori Hoffland. To the SOAR process, I also, the University Senate needs to thank the coordinating committee, the facilitation team, the task force co-chairs, and the authors and approvers and the task forces who will be doing their work as we convene again in the fall. To President Kelley, and in your office, Pat Bonet and Sandy Rios and Cherie Williams, and the vice presidents, Vice President Reesor and Walton and Brecky, and Vice President DiLorenzo and Dan Milovitz for all of the work that we've done together this year, particularly in the Provost office for the financial support for the University Senate and the leadership team. Special thanks to Diane Haddon and to Michelle Hamilton and Chelsea Grover. I have worked the University Senate Executive Committee pretty hard this year, and so to everybody on the University Senate Executive Committee, Dana Harsel, Kanishka Marasinge, Eric Murphy, Charlie Kurtz, Tanner Franklin, Tom DiLorenzo, and Suzanne Anderson, thank you very much for everything that you've done within the Senate Executive Committee. And to past Chair Ryan Zier and Chair-elect incoming Chair Rebecca Weaver Hightower, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all for allowing me to serve this year as the chair of the University Senate and for your work and leadership across campus, and best of luck with the work that you have to do before the end of the semester. Thanks for coming today. Are there any Any other questions? Hearing none, seeing none. Marcia?
Yes, I have a question.
Yes?
Is there any chance that we could get a faculty lounge? A place for faculty to meet?
I think I'm the wrong person to answer that question. I think that, is there anybody else who'd like to answer that question? President Kelley? To conversation?
Marcia, I think there is an opportunity, but it's going to take some possibly cooperation from our retail and private sector around us. I'll use an example. I had conversations with the owner of the old Suite 49 a couple of 3 years ago, and there was quite a bit of interest on his part for letting us perhaps develop the concept of a university club. Those conversations are still open. I had dinner the other evening and sat right next to the gentleman, brought it up again. He's still thinking about it. So the answer is yes, but.
I'll talk to him.
Let's keep the idea alive. It's not a bad idea.
I'm wondering, I really like the idea of the headshots on the website, and I really appreciate the interest in improving the website and how we can get more information about the percentage and so forth. Can we, on the website, get notification of committee meetings, when they are meeting and their agendas and minutes? I know some committees are very good and that information is posted, but I'm just thinking again in terms of the transparency and so forth, and for faculty to know really what's going on and where they can go with an issue or an idea, to have a full accounting of when committees and also the president's cabinet, the dean's council, et cetera, when they're meeting their agendas.
I can speak to the University Senate committees, and that's absolutely been a part of the conversation that we've been having and wanting to have with the chairs. So stay tuned. Thanks for the suggestion, and we're doing what we can to figure out a good way to make that happen.
And just to chime on with Melissa's comments, I met this afternoon, just 2 hours ago, with the group that's putting together the next iteration of the university website, and I think that will be very possible as we move into the next generation UND website.
I'd like to thank you for your hard work this year.
Amen.
Yes, sure.
I would like to echo that coming from Staff Senate. You have been a great addition to the leadership, and we've met numerous times, and we at staff would like to thank you for including us. So thank you. Kudos to you.
Thank you, Shar. On that note, maybe we will anticipate good things to come, and thank you all for your hard work, and see you on the campus the next couple of weeks. Thanks.